Welcome to our Don't Get Bench talk. So, you guys know what's been going on with bench accounting, and let's talk about it. I feel like a lot of people are not really talking about the nuances of why bench was acquired by employer.com so quickly, and how they left. I think it was 35,000 of their customers just sitting around for a whole weekend with no information. All of a sudden they got acquired. Everything's okay. And then how the CEO went on X and was saying some things like, hey, I will never go through this process of getting fired after a Series C and getting benched by bench. So,
Yeah. Well, the founder definitely got benched, and there's a lot to unpack there. The big news was, I believe, last Friday, the 27th of December, right when startups are getting ready for year end. Bench suddenly closed their doors. They blocked access to their customers and told everyone that they basically had to wait over the weekend to be able to download their data. There was a sudden emergency rescue, probably not on the best terms, garage sale price from bench to employer.com.
mm-hmm.
And there's a bit of fallout from that. As professionals that work with accounting and finance systems, one, like from a product standpoint, bench wasn't really doing anything new. It wasn't a particularly useful solution. Gary Vee says there's a lot more sizzle than actual steak.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to diving into where we think bench went wrong, what the CEO has said, and really what the company and the investors are not saying.
Yeah. So the CEO, the original CEO, he went on X and he basically said, a lot of things that I think he was trying to defend himself. One,
He definitely wasn't happy with how he exited the startup. I believe it was 2019, 2021
mm-hmm.
that he was effectively pushed out by his board. And for a lot of high growth startups, that's a pretty common occurrence that the founder either didn't choose the right board members and is replaced, or they have a couple of bad quarters. Their growth plans are out of sync with what they actually promised investors. And investors wanted to make their money back at any cost. We're quick to replace him.
This is actually like something common that happens, right? When a CEO is basically fired and replaced by another CEO.
Yeah, so the Series A is really the tipping point where a lot of founders are oftentimes replaced or attempted to be replaced by their own boards. It's a pretty, I don't want to say it's a common occurrence, but it happens enough it happens enough for founders to need to plan for that possibility in the future,
mm-hmm.
in the form of the board members that they pick, and then also the kind of additional rights that founders sign over to different investors, either whether those are like what are called like major investor rights, information rights.
Wait. So I'm a little bit confused. So let's say like I am the guy from bench, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could go back in time and redo all this.
Yeah.
And fix things. So like where would I even start? Would I start at pre-seed, or would I start at seed? Or
well, you really, as a founder, you really need to start with the end in mind.
mm-hmm.
So pre-seed founders, the last thing they're thinking about is who's on their cap table, who they're going to give board seats to. But
mm-hmm.
that's as far as staying in the startup game as a founder, that's a major decision, is finding investors that, okay, one, they'll provide money. Yeah, every investor is going to provide you money.
mm-hmm.
But two, as a founder, you need to have a sixth sense for finding investors that are long-term thinkers, and that when they tell you they believe in your vision and that they're with you for the long run, that they actually mean that, and they're not more opportunistic, that they're not looking to invest money. And we see it all the time. There's a startup that gets a huge growth round. They miss 1-2 quarters of their growth targets, and then suddenly their investor, who's their best buddy, is now replacing them, gutting the company, and just trying to run you for a small profit. So it's a political savvy almost that founders need to learn and cultivate when it comes to choosing who your major investors are going to be. Because investors are just that. People forget that an investor is also a business partner. And that means that they end up a lot of times having a major say in your company.
Right, because they have other people they have to satisfy.
Yeah, those investors have investors who also have investors that want to hear that everyone is making money for them.
Or they have just rich people depending on them to make them money.
Or rich people, a pension fund, whatever,
Which
whatever,
are like LPs.
whatever it is. And I mean, it's startups are in business to disrupt, make great new products, and change the status quo. And in the process, they're doing that to make money, whether it's for a founder, for an investor. But at the end of the day, investors are most concerned with their portfolio and how the investors in those VCs are going to look at that fund's returns. Because every investor has a boss, it's another investor, and they need to make money for them too.
Okay, I get that. But this guy that owned the ex-CEO of Bench said, he tweeted, okay, Ian Crosby, he posted something on X and he basically announced that Bench accounting shut down. I think he was the first one to announce the shutdown, and then everybody's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because actually, like, even our clients that use Bench didn't even know. We had to let them know that they shut down.
Yeah, so the founder of Bench had to, he posted his own side of the story. It's pretty lengthy. It's a good read, but Bench basically did nothing to notify their customers that there was any kind of service outage. Obviously, they couldn't pay some bills, they couldn't keep the lights on, and they had to kill the website. But there were a lot of situations where we had to go to our customers and let them know that Bench was out and that we were going to have to migrate them to another platform.
He basically said, when he was responding to a tweet, he's like, I will never have this happen to me again by VC. So what could he have done if you're what would you tell a new founder? How can they avoid? I don't know if they can avoid it. I mean, how can they really think about this? Because they have so many other things to think about.
Well, there's ways to avoid it, because you have people like Mark Zuckerberg, you have Jack Dorsey, you have, well, not Travis Kalanick, but you have people that have gone from pre-seed, pre-product, and have gone the distance to exit their company. Mm-hmm. They're legends. They're awesome. So it is possible. What happened with Bench was after they had raised their Series C, the founder got pushed out. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that could have happened, but usually by the time that a startup is in Series C, the founder or the co-founding team will not have 50% ownership in the company, which means that they're having to suddenly play politics and be very selective with who they have chosen to sit on the company's board of directors up to that point.
Which is the cap table.
Which is not necessarily the cap table, it is who has invested in you last. So as a startup grows, the number of board seats usually increases as well. And the board of directors, it is their job to represent all of the investors on the cap table. So instead of every major company decision having to be taken to every last investor on your cap table, even the people that own 10 shares, your grandma that invested in you from day one, instead those major decisions go to a board.
Okay.
And
because they only have certain seats available for a board to sit on.
Yes.
To make these ultimate decisions. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And
so I just want to make sure I understand. So let's say I invested in Ian in the beginning as an angel investor, and I said, I believe in you, here's $50,000. Just because I put money in doesn't necessarily mean that I'll ever get a board seat.
Right.
So can we talk more about that? How do you acquire a seat?
So typically it's the biggest investors in your company will ask for a board seat. And when you're pre-seed starting out, angel investors should get no board seats just because of the sheer power and influence that they have over a startup.
Okay.
Usually it's once you get to seed stage investors, your first VC investor, they'll ask for a board seat. Okay, great. So they get a board seat. So then what'll happen is every time there is a board of directors, there's an odd number of seats. So usually seed stage investors, there's 3 seats.
So is there, so just so I understand, because I don't really know anything about boardroom politics.
Sure.
So per seed stage, is there a designated amount of seats that are like given to the whole board seats?
It really depends.
World?
It's going to depend on the startup.
Okay.
As the startup grows in size and also investment stage, you'll typically see more board seats added. But at the same time, you'll see people that, like older investors, earlier stage investors that are already on the board, may give up their seat to a larger investor coming in. So if you're a seed stage startup and somebody puts $1 million into your startup, they may get a board seat.
Okay.
But then suddenly if you're Series A, that Series A investor is going to want a board seat as well. And that $1 million investor, unless they can cut a bigger check and try to negotiate to stay on the board, they may see themselves off the board.
When a VC gives you money, do you, especially in the pre-seed stage, as a founder, do you automatically need to expect them to ask for a board seat? Because who creates the board seats? When is that created?
So the board of directors is created when you form the company.
When you form the LLC?
When you form the C corporation.
Okay.
So the corporation by federal law is required to have a board of directors. Usually it's going to be the founder, any co-founders.
That are on the board already?
That are on the board.
Okay. When you create that?
When you form the company, yeah.
Okay.
When you start, bench day 0, you put in your $10,000, you put in all your savings and money from your friends and family. You're required as a corporation, because a corporation is its own entity, to have, that corporation needs a board to oversee the company decisions.
Got it.
So typically it's going to be like the founders, any co-founders, and a lot of times founders will just leave the extra board seats open, because technically you need a minimum of 3.
Got it.
So you always need an odd number of seats, because that way if there's any kind of vote, you can't have a tie. But a lot of times founders will just leave the board seats open, and then it's expected that if you get a serious institutional investor, a VC fund, a big dollar angel fund, they're going to ask for a board seat.
Okay.
Now, as a founder, it's up to you to look at this person that's about to write you a really big check.
Can you say no?
You can say no.
But do they usually say no? Do they feel obligated? Does a founder feel obligated to give away that board seat?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, because a lot of times founders just want the money to get started on their business or to launch the product, to keep it going. So they'll say, okay, yeah, if you got $1 million from me, I'll give you a board seat. And they don't really think long term about how that affects that founder's ability to run their business and not having to run every single decision by their board.
Right.
Depending on how involved, or some might even say neurotic, your board member is going to be.
Yes.
They can either be pretty hands off, or they're going to want to be kept up to date, almost to the week, on everything you're doing with your startup.
Okay, so this is why you're saying be very careful about who you give a board seat to.
Yep.
Because they could literally, in Ian's case, they got all this, I think they got over $100 million.
Yeah.
And even though they got that money, they still fired him.
Yeah. So, with the case of Bench, they got all the way to Series C. So we're talking, 8-figure rounds of growth capital. But with that, the dilution that Ian underwent to get to that point, Ian no longer had control of the company based on his percentage ownership of the company shares.
Right.
So that means that the company ownership was determined by the board of directors. So Ian made some, I don't want to say made some deals, but he said yes to some investors that wanted board seats that did not share his vision for Bench. And at some point, enough of these people get together on the board. They always talk in the back. And they say, hey, we can do so much better with Bench if we replace Ian. We have a CEO. They're skilled. They've had a couple of exits. They work with us. They'll do great in this job. And then they push out the founder and put someone else in. I see it all the time in growth. They call it growth equity, private equity. It's pretty common in the playbook.
Or if he had had 51% of the shares or equity, would he have had more power? Or it doesn't matter because his board has the power to make decisions to get him out.
The short answer is that it doesn't matter. So even if Ian had 51% of the shares in Bench, the board would still make decisions around like who the CEO of the company is, in this case, Ian. And by the time that the board had acted against Ian, even if Ian had 51% of the shares, the board could have voted to replace him. They could have gone out and told the whole company, hey, Ian's out. He's not the CEO anymore. You're just going to see him part-time. He's going to be talking at a couple of retreats.
Yeah.
And then Ian would have to go and sue his board as a 51% holder to reverse a decision. So from like a real life practical standpoint, even though he technically like owns most of the company, the damage would have been done because you have a bunch of confused employees, confused customers
because of the board.
Because of the sudden replacement, and then suddenly it's all in court.
Oh, because the board could not keep you in the loop of their replacement that they choose to replace. They could just do it because they just can.
Right, but as a 50, like if Ian were a 51% holder, it is on him to ensure that there are enough board votes that will always back Ian or the CEO, the founder, as a 51% holder.
But how do you do that?
It's all in relationship management.
So is it all like boardroom politics?
It's all politics. It is finding investors that think about your company long term, because there's going to be a lot of investors that are ready to throw money at your startup and say we're going to take you to the next level. But the minute that you have a rough quarter, the minute that you fall behind on your product development roadmap that you promised them, suddenly that your best friend is out to get you, and they're trying to figure out how to salvage their investment because they're really just trying to look good on their annual returns and their reports to their investors instead of sticking with you long term.
Right. Or there could have been like that one person on the board that could have been talking to employer.com.
Yeah,
for a couple of months.
Well, I'm sure, like...
Right? Like, how did that happen so freaking fast? It happened over, like, 2 days. All of a sudden, boom, they're acquired.
Yep.
Do acquisitions happen that fast?
They do. If a company's in trouble like that, there's always plenty of people ready to buy. Okay. And employer.com bought Bench at a garage sale price because they knew Friday, service interrupted, Bench couldn't pay their bills to keep the lights on, so they had the weekend to work a deal out. It was probably a terrible deal for the Bench investors. It was a terrible deal for the Bench founders. It was a great deal for employer.com.
Got it.
And that happens.
This is like Monopoly, live Monopoly.
Yeah, it's like live Monopoly because the investors would rather take a chance on, having employer.com buy them for pennies on the dollar than shut the whole company down, liquidate Bench, have to pay out, back payroll, have to refund customers money, and it's a nightmare. And especially this close to tax time, if Bench had some big enough customers, they probably could have sued Bench for failure to provide service.
Yeah, so got it, because it was so close to the end of the year.
Yeah.
So, I have like so many questions. Did he actually make a great product?
Well,
like,
that's
from the beginning.
That's the other side of the coin. Is
did he actually make anything?
That's the other side of the coin. Is I've never met a Bench customer that liked the service. They always liked Bench's price. They always liked that Bench would do their tax returns for free. But as far as like a proper bookkeeping and accounting service, Bench was never a great option. So them going under doesn't really surprise me.
Okay.
Beyond the necessity of choosing your board of directors carefully, I think Bench was also one of those companies like a WeWork where the founder went and made all kinds of promises about being the next big thing, tech-enabled bookkeeping. We're going to have smart AI bookkeepers that are going to do a lot of the like accounting work in an automated way. and we're going to get rid of all the human bookkeepers, and that's going to drive our margins. We're going to save money. We're going to scale that way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Bench had to rely on like cheap offshore bookkeeping labor to actually do the accounting piece. Like that product innovation, the disruption that the founder was promising from day one never happened, and at some point their investors got sick of that.
So you're saying that Ian never actually created the innovative, disruptive product that he was talking about.
Right.
It was just never done. It was never created.
Never happened. And Ian could go out there and tell investors, hey, we're getting all these customers. We're spending so much on marketing. We're going to dominate the space by getting all the startups out there to sign up for Bench.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, you need to innovate in some way to do bookkeeping in like a cheaper, better, if you will, manner.
Mm-hmm.
And that day never came.
Right. So he just never created anything. It was just like all like talk. Which if you follow me on my women founder campaign, is one of the number one thing that I talk about is that as a founder, man or woman, you need to be a salesperson. Obviously, Ian was an incredible salesperson.
Yeah, he sold a vision. Mm-hmm. He said there's a better way of doing accounting and bookkeeping, mm-hmm. but he never really delivered on that. And he was able to talk up his dream, his vision, all the way through Series C.
Damn.
But it's at some point, his board caught on to the product that never was. You know, he may as well have been selling the flying car.
Right. Got it. So I think that the reason we actually are talking about this, what happened with Ian and what happened with Bench, is because going into 2025, I really feel like founders need to be careful. You can't do that anymore. You really need to focus on making a great product. You can't just talk about it. You can't just fluff it up. You can't be the ultimate salesperson and just make up a product that actually isn't going to exist, because people are going to see right through it. I think what do you think about that?
Yeah, nowadays you have a little bit of wiggle room as a founder to promise investors that you're going to deliver on, a certain vision. Mm-hmm. But the idea of constantly being as a founder, the idea of being in this constant fundraising mode where you're constantly selling a future that is 3, 5, 10 years, whatever down the road. Like if you don't actually know how you're going to execute on your product and service goals now, and you're just relying on raising investment dollars to spend on marketing and customer acquisition and trying to corner a market effectively that way, that approach doesn't work anymore. There is too much competition from other investment classes with interest rates being higher. You have VCs that have been burned by the dozen mm-hmm. in the last couple of years from investing in founders that never quite delivered. So VCs today, investors today, are very cautious, and they're going to ask much tougher questions about how you, not just like your idea, but you as the founder and you as the team that you've hired mm-hmm. are going to do what you're telling them you're going to do, and that it's actually feasible. They're going to do a lot more homework into your startup and your team's abilities to execute on that more than ever.
If I was a VC, I'd definitely be stalking and seeing if they're actually doing the homework.
Yep.
Before I even think about investing in them. So, do you have anything else you want to add? Let me see if
you hit the nail right on the head. VCs they're spending more time doing due diligence. They're spending more time doing what's called technical due diligence. So talking to your CTO, talking to your head of engineering, talking to your head of product to see what's going on with your roadmap and your milestones. And one, as a founder, you need to prepare for fundraisers to take longer to close because of that increased due diligence. Mm-hmm. But then the other side of that is VCs are also far less forgiving now in this current environment. So Bench raised their Series C in 2021 at the height of the bubble. They were on top of the world. They got all the money. But really, the more money that you raise, the higher the expectations are from your new investors to deliver on that.
Can you like explain that to me as if I'm like 10 years old?
Sure. So if I go and ask you for $100
Mm-hmm.
and you give me the $100, I promise you'll make.
Wait, are you the founder and I'm the VC?
Sure. So if I'm the founder and you're the VC,
Okay.
and I tell you that I need $100 to open my lemonade stand and print flyers, buy supplies, and get customers in that and get customers to let's say a lemonade stand.
Yeah.
If you give me $100, you're going to expect getting $500 back, $1,000 back as an investor.
So do I determine that?
The market determines that.
The market determines that.
The market determines that.
Okay.
Based on a variety of factors that are beyond this video.
Okay.
But basically, if I go and ask you for a small amount of money, as an investor, what you're going to expect back isn't going to be huge. But if I just have like a simple lemonade stand at the end of my cul-de-sac, and I go and ask you for $1 million to put into my lemonade stand, which can only sell, so much lemonade, then as an investor, you're going to expect.
I think you're crazy.
Well, one, I'm a good founder, so I sold you on the vision of giving me $1 million.
I think it's astounding that you're coming to me and telling me you're going to at your cul-de-sac.
This is lemonade.
And you're going to sell me lemonade.
But this is tech-enabled lemonade. Okay, so I got my tech-enabled lemonade stand.
It's AI.
My AI-driven tech lemonade stand. And so I ask you for $1 million to put into my lemonade stand at the end of my street.
Yeah.
As an investor, you're going to say, okay, cool. Well, when am I getting $5 million back? When am I getting $10 million back? And at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter how many cups of lemonade you sell for $1, $2, $5, $100, you're never going to be able to make the amount of money that investor is expecting. So for Bench to go out and raise a massive Series C, Ian had to go out and tell his investors that we're going to get hundreds of thousands of startups. We're going to service the entire startup bookkeeping ecosystem, that we're going to be number one. We're going to dominate the space. And it's something that you see time and again. You see it with WeWork, you see it with Compass Real Estate, you see it with players that hype up a company as being tech-enabled or being a tech whatever company. And because of that tech piece that never happens, they're going to use that to drive superior margins and dominate a space. And that didn't happen with Bench.
Well, also, too, obviously, he never, ever really made a great product.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He just never, ever made a great product because of whatever reason. Maybe he didn't know how to make a great product. Maybe he didn't know what kind of product to make. But he just kept just selling the idea of this product that was going to, just take over the whole accounting world, right?
Yeah, and like any great salesman, he was able to get the next round of investors excited for the massive disruption that was just around the corner. You can always hire more engineers. You're going to hire more salespeople. You're gonna triple your ad spend budget, and this time we're gonna really get it.
Okay, so they get rid of Ian, right? Because they realize that he's full of shit.
Yeah.
Point blank. Thank you, Ian, for selling us to this, and we got $100 million. Thank you. Bye. We're gonna get another CEO in who actually can probably make this product that we've been sold on, that we actually think is amazing. Let's get this new guy in and let's see if he can make this product. Right?
I would disagree.
What happened?
I would say that Ian's newest investors, his Series C people, realized that Ian sold them on a product that Ian didn't know how to make, a business Ian didn't know how to scale, and a business Ian didn't know how to run. So instead of those investors going into Bench with the idea of replacing Ian, they realize there's nothing there, and they're trying to make the best of the situation. They're trying to make, and I hate to go back to the lemonade stand, they're trying to make lemonade out of the lemons that Ian left them and try to rescue their investment and try to run Bench as a lean, profitable company as best as they can. Get rid of all the techno-babble BS and just try to run a bookkeeping shop that can maybe make some of their money back.
So actually the VCs were actually put in a really horrible position.
Well, I mean, they're VCs. There's no, I mean, they kind of deserve it, but
No, but if you think about like your like let's say I'm on the board and I really like Ian. And I'm like shit, like he's got to go. Like I've been supporting this dude.
yeah,
Like forever and ever. Like I've been there. I really like him. And then I realize the rest of the board is right and I vote him out. Like we fire him, right?
yep.
But then I'm just like, what now? Like what what's left? Like that happened when they got rid of him, and then I think like 4 years later, here we are. Bench accounting is bye.
Yeah.
So what happens during this 4 years? They just wait until they're bought out.
Well, either the company has, either they're looking for an exit. Maybe the board got enough hints and breadcrumbs from the founder, and maybe they know enough themselves about how to build the product that Ian wanted. Maybe Ian just had difficulty running a larger organization. There's a lot of reasons.
But when they replace him with a new CEO, do they replace him with someone that they think is going to be able to build his vision? Or they don't really have those expectations?
So the board is going to replace the CEO. Well, one, it's always going to be someone that they've worked with in the past, because you're taking a huge chance replacing the original founder. So you want someone that's in the business of replacing founders. And yes, there are many CEOs out there that have entire careers of just going into companies after the founder gets kicked out. And the board either has to decide on continuing Ian's vision, going on their own in a new direction, or maybe they just realize that because Bench raised a massive Series C round at the height of a bubble, there's no way that those investors are going to get their money back from...
Like they already know.
Yeah, they already know that there's not going to be the Series C investors already know there's not going to be a Series D investor that's going to come in and value Bench higher than they already overpaid for the company. So a lot of times...
Well, they just fire their sales guy.
Well, they just fired the sales guy because they realized that like the thing is never coming.
And there's no product.
There's no product. The flying car, 10 years later, the flying car still isn't here, and the flying car isn't 2 years away. So the board decides to cut their losses, get rid of the flying car salesman, and try to make a business that's at least going to like return their money.
So I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying that the board is just trying to sustain as much of the flying car as it's coming the fuck apart? And they're going to try to sell as much of the flying car as they can at the end when the flying car is no longer flying.
So
it's like basically on the ground, dying.
So the company, so the founder said our company makes flying cars.
Yeah.
And the flying car founder has gone for 10 years telling investors that Bench is making the flying car.
Yes, I know.
The flying
I know
accountant.
Yes.
And so suddenly at some point the board realizes that the flying car is never coming.
Yes.
They're not going to be able to convince anyone else that the flying car is coming because everyone else the flying car isn't coming.
I get that.
So they say, okay, we're not going to make flying cars. We're going to make Jaguars instead.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying once they get rid of Ian, right? And they realize that the flying car is never going to fly.
Yep.
Do they just try to sustain as much of the company as they can? Like literally the parts of the company? Like, you know how there's like, what is it called? Those places that they put cars in.
Like a junkyard?
Yeah. Like a junkyard.
Yeah.
Are you saying that they're just trying to keep as much of Bench as possible so they can have as many parts as they want so they can sell them?
No,
so to speak, or no?
No, usually because the company is always working on building this flying car. There's a lot.
Even after Ian left,
there's a lot of bloat. There's a lot of engineers. There's a lot of marketing and overhead that is sucking up a lot of investment funds. So at some point, the board decides we're not going to spend any more money on trying to build this flying car that's never going to happen. Mm-hmm. So they usually take a company, fire all the non-essential people, strip out all the overhead, all the operating expenses, lean out the business, and just try to run it at a profit, or as
As
close
to
to
a
a profit as they can, because when the Series C investors came in, they were still excited about the flying car, and they wanted Ian to spend all this money on selling the flying car and getting people excited about the flying car and getting customers to sign up for bench, and spending money in an unsustainable way to keep getting those customers, on the promise that one day bench will be profitable because bench will have figured out how to improve their bookkeeping service and get the margin up to a place where it makes sense to spend all this money chasing customers. But at the end of the day, bench couldn't do that. They were still bookkeeping in an old-fashioned way. They had a terrible user experience coming from people that work in finance and accounting. Their reputation in the industry is known as being very user unfriendly, very dumb, and not innovative. And really, you may as well have just gone and hired PwC or Ernst & Young, because you were getting the same level of bookkeeping service. Or you could have gone with Ted's Taxes. You could have gotten fucking Ted's Taxes to do your books at the same, probably at a better level of service, and it didn't cost you that much more.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think we've said enough.
All right.
I think that's good. So if you have any questions or remarks, please put them in the comments. We want to, let's just get into it. Let's get under the hood and talk about this, because founders will benefit from these conversations that aren't being had.
Yeah, and with any acquisition, with employer.com buying out bench, there's going to be more layoffs at bench. I feel bad for those people. Our heart goes out to them. Thankfully, January is usually the strongest hiring season for tech employees, so hopefully that's a silver lining there. And if you're a startup founder and you've been benched, and we've had a couple of clients that did get benched, and you're looking to move to another system, DM us and we'll help get you on the right track.
Yes. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.